Let's get it started.
Double O.
Think like a rapper.
Check, 1, 2. This is Double O, and you are on Think Like a Rapper, the podcast where we think like rappers, I guess. Today, I have somebody that I haven't caught up with in a while, and it's amazing to actually get to do so. We went to the University of Pennsylvania together, the cabal of weirdo people there. He was part of it that decided to buck the trend, and even though graduated from these really nice universities, not go directly into the generic sort of path, I guess. But he is, I mean, the accolades are insane. He is a Grammy Award winner. He's got degrees on degrees on degrees. One of my favorite things that I think he's ever done was definitely the first sort of choose your own adventure music video. It was the first time that I saw somebody use YouTube in an extremely innovative way that I don't think anybody at that time was thinking about interactivity in that way. And this was well before sort of Vine and TikTok and Musical.ly and everything else took over. Don't know if he still goes by it, but I used to know him as Devo Springsteen, you know what I'm saying? Devo Harris. Thank you, man. Thank you for being on.
And I'm excited to be here, man. It's been a long time coming. This is overdue.
I know. When I first met you, you know, you had a whole lot more hair. You had the full fro. And let's start even before I even meet you. What are your earliest memories of hip hop?
Of hip hop, I was a kid. I grew up in Germany and in the Midwest in the U.S. And so I would hear like my dad's hip hop, which was like Curtis Blow and Houdini. But you know, it was cool, and I vibed with it, but I didn't like super connect with it. And then I listened to Snoop Dogg and stuff like that. Growing up, and a little bit of Biggie and whatnot. But I was in high school, and I heard The Roots, actually. The Roots, Do You Want More? I guess was their second album. That's when I was like, oh, there's a space for me in this. Like, it's a little bit jazzy, a little bit cerebral, but still like kind of hard. And that's when I really started to connect and like dive into hip hop more.
Okay.
After the
So it was so for you, it took sort of the musicality to sort of step up, or at least expand for you to really sort of buy into it.
Yeah, the musicality, and then like I felt like Black Thought was speaking to. There was like innovative flows, and then the subject matter was like real regionalized, and which I really liked, this like East Coast vibe, but there was like thoughtfulness to it that I appreciated. And so if it wasn't for the Roots and for that album, I probably wouldn't have gotten involved in it, or at least it would have been much later.
And that's super interesting, considering obviously your next journey is to Philly. Did that play any part in sort of thinking about going to Penn, like thinking about going to school, like, oh, there's also this other thing going on here that could be interesting?
You know what? I never thought about it, but it probably is related. I wanted to go to business school, and I said, what's the best business school? Oh, that one. And I have family in Philadelphia. I think the Roots thing was like, oh, that's super cool. Like, there are people like me, sort of, much cooler than me. But so that's the only school I applied to was Penn.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, it's funny for me. It was the opposite. I didn't realize I ran Penn Relays, and I was like, this would be a nice place to go. And then my homie was like, you know, this is an Ivy League school. And I was just like, oh, well, I guess that's it then. But then randomly, got a recruiting letter from Princeton, between junior and senior year. And it was like, oh, maybe I can go to that place. Um, so then prior to sort of the Roots, were you more into, what were you listening to? Were you listening to jazz? Were you listening to music in that space? Were you even connected to music in that space?
Uh, I listen to music, but I listen to music more like passively. And so I listen to hip hop. I listen to Biggie and some like Diggable Planets, and this is like. So people probably hear this like, who is he talking about?
Exactly.
Who is Diggable Planets?
Shabazz Palaces, rather. If they need the updated version.
Right. And so yeah, I listen to stuff, or even like Stone Temple Pilots, and like just I was all over the place, but I wasn't like connecting to the stuff.
Yeah.
Then after the Roots, I started to dive in, and then I'm like into Grave Diggers and like early Fugees. Yeah. Then I'm like really like this is my vibe. I'm a hip hop guy. Raekwon, okay, I get it. And then I really dived in after like 95, 96.
What's so interesting to me when I talk about the story, the fictional hero version of my time at Penn, one thing that is always clear is that it felt like your class, and it felt like what was going on. There was already this sort of groundwork being laid for this music experience that was informed a little bit by sort of what was happening with the Roots and Black Lily and everything, but I wasn't there. So talk about that a little bit. When you got to Penn, because you got to Penn in what, 96?
95.
Okay. So when you get to Penn in 95, what is happening on campus that then gets you from someone who was listening to the Roots and being like, I like this, to actually being a practitioner, to being like, oh, I can be in this?
Man, this is the craziest time, I feel like the memories of that time. But there's a lot going on. So this was 95. And so, yeah, started at Penn, which I wonder about that time. And I feel like it was super electric and magical. And I'm just like, was every year like that? People start 2011, or is it like that for them? I don't feel like it, but whatever the case is, this is when the Fugees were getting big. There's like with their second album, The Score had came out. And so wherever you walked on campus, it's just Fugees. Fugees playing super loud. And I was starting to get into like Boot Camp Click and all this New York rap. And I remember going to a show during the first semester, some show, and they had the Foxy Brown and Boot Camp Click, and it's like all the hottest rappers. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I remember this guy opened up the show. So everyone else was super popular, but the guy that opened the show, I never heard of him. And I don't think anyone had heard of him there. So he's doing his raps, but everyone else, all the other acts were so hot that people just wanted to get you to the other act. So they're booing this guy, booing him. And he just like still was like super collected. He did his raps. And I'm like, this guy, he's super cool. Like he's totally not letting this get to him that everyone is booing him. Even though he's just starting, I'm going to follow this guy because he's doing his thing out here. It was Jay-Z. And I think it was one of his first shows, not his first like solo show. I saw a reference to it more recently, but it was just super electric. And all that stuff that was happening with his boot camp, the Roots were like blowing up right then, the Fugees, all of that was happening on the East Coast, Philadelphia. Fugees performed at our school that year because we had just booked them right before they blew up and when we could afford them. And so that's around when we started the Gathering. And so all those influences.
break down if you can, because obviously I know, but nobody else knows what sort of the gathering was and its ideas when you guys started.
Yeah. So my crew that I hung out with was bunch of dudes from New York and LA and whatnot that these guys. And so they were a lot of rappers and singers and just people who were deep into music, musicians. And so we started this event our sophomore year, which was super unorganized, unorthodox. It wasn't sanctioned, but we basically had a live music show once a week in the student union called The Gathering. But it wasn't just students; it was kids from the neighborhood, artists from the greater Philadelphia area, and anyone could come. We had a band. I would DJ. I knew nothing about DJ. I was just starting to DJ, and so we had this open mic thing, very unstructured. And eventually, we kept that going throughout our time. Eventually, other kids took it over. It became more sanctioned with the university. Last I checked, it was still running, even as a couple of years ago. But all that East Coast stuff and live music, that was all sort of popping then. Black Lily was starting to come up. The Philadelphia neo soul scene was just starting. The seeds of that were starting. And so all of that, I think, I carried over to my own music that I started producing later.
So there's a very interesting, I've always tried to figure out what it is. Because, like we said, there was something very interesting that was happening. But I almost do you think that had you gone to any other sort of university, that you would have had the balls, the audacity to sort of jump headfirst into those things, the arts? I mean, because like you said, you were similar to me. I'd been DJing in high school, but when I got to Penn and saw everything that you guys had going on, everything from Dugius and John and Ted and Brian Peterson, it gave me sort of I think that there was that inherently something interesting at Penn in terms of the for better or worse, we see it now obviously with Trump, but the sort of say yes to everything and then read the book later sort of interview style, say you're yeah, I know how to do that. That there's a maybe even the seeds of sort of startup culture of this move fast and break stuff sort of ideology, because I don't feel like that just existed in sort of in the air at other places where you could say, oh, I'm gonna make an album, or I'm gonna just start sort of producing these things. When you look back at it, do you think that it was something inherent to the to the school's philosophy sort of at the time, or just, again, we just happened to hit, you got to see other people doing it, and so it made it easier for you to sort of accomplish and figure those things out?
I think it was that school at that time. I think there was just something happening there. And I wonder about that. I wonder if I went to Michigan State at the same time, would the same things happen? I don't think so. Yeah. And I think there's a special time in U.S. culture. There's a special time in East Coast and rap music culture. I think, at least at that time, the school was very pre-professional, very much okay, you come in here to get set up to do whatever you're going to do, but in a major way. And I think that we happen to be there with super talented people as well. And I think the school did a really good job of promoting diversity and having you meet different people. Or maybe that was just our circles, but I feel like the school did a better job of that than most places that I've been to. So for people that don't know that are listening to this, you know, a lot of kids from our crew and our class went on to, well, one is John Legend, I'm sure we'll get to. One is Ted, who you mentioned, who's big LA fixture in the hip hop
Yeah.
scene.
Snoop Dogg's manager,
Yeah,
Cashmere
so
Agency.
long time, yeah, Cashmere Agency. You know, Aaron Jones had Dugious, which was like, to me, they were about to be the next Roots. And they're a fixture in the New York rap scene. And so there's just a lot of heat happening. And so you felt like, oh, why can't I do it? Because people were already seeing success even then.
Yeah, it's a you know, when I try to think about some of those flashpoints, it's always interesting to me because it you know, again, there is I'm sure when you got to school, there was a very tried and true path. There was the, you know, you're going to one of the best business schools in the country. You're going to get a degree from it. It's going to send you to these places. And then that's kind of, you know, that is sort of the path, especially, you know, with the accolades that are attached to the school. And then you get there and it's just like, I can do anything. I can do anything that I want to do. To fast forward a little bit. So you graduate, you get out, and you do sort of, at least initially, choose the more traditional career path, correct? Both you and John Legend actually did, right? Because he went to, where was it, BCG or something like that? Yeah, because I remember having a hilarious conversation with him, figuring it out when I was trying to potentially go that way. Just never seemed to work out for me. I winged it since I got out.
Right.
So you moved to New York, and you are at a, you know, in a corporate gig, but you guys are still working on music. John is John Stevens at the time. He had already had a couple of things that happened. If anyone's read his story, he had, you know, already sort of played on Lauryn Hill's album. And what's the thought process when you guys get out of school at that point? Are you still full-fledged with the music, or is it kind of like, oh, this is just the pastime thing, and like, or are you using the day jobs to essentially fund the dream? Like, what were you guys thinking about when you got out?
Well, let me take a step back before we get into this.
Let's go.
And I want for people to have a little bit of insight into you as well. So before graduating, essentially, I used to be a singer, and then I tried out for Inspiration, I think, and didn't make the group. All my friends were doing cool music stuff, so that's when I said I'll DJ, because no one was a DJ in my little crew. So that's how I started DJing. And so if, like, towards my senior year, like, if you wanted a hip hop DJ on campus, you would get either me or you get you.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. And I remember this at that time being like, damn, man, this guy's good. I think you were like a real DJ. I was like a fake DJ. But I'm like, man, this guy's like stealing my clientele. What's going on? And I got all the little lights and the smoke machines from downtown. I was like, to spice it up a little bit. I'm like, he ain't got these though.
I did.
But those were exciting times, and it was just so much fun. But I remember you especially, like, killing these parties on campus. And I'm like, yeah, I got to get my DJ game up here. So I want to give you props for that, for our little kingdom in West Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we graduated, moved to New York. John has spent some time in Boston. But yeah, at that time, you know, we lived in New York, but we come down to Philly every weekend to rehearse, and we would perform at bars and weddings and little clubs. Like I think I'd make like 25 or $50 a show. And for me, I didn't know what would happen with it. I just know we were 22, 23. We got free drinks at the bar when we would do our little shows. But you never know. It could, maybe something could happen from it. And if not, it's fun. And then so when my cousin, Kanye West, had moved to New York, that's when I started piecing some things together that maybe this could be a bigger scenario than I imagined.
At that, when he did move, because he moved to like Newark, right? At that time, did it immediately make sense that sort of what maybe the component that was necessary for John to, get to sort of the next level was Kanye? Like when you introduce them together, was it just like, oh, this is another person who's got already some production credits, and this is a person, that's super talented, and they should just work together?
It was a bit more than that. So yeah, you when I graduated, I worked at PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. They had like 40,000 consultants at that time, and I was a consultant. And from day one, I was like, I have to get out of here. And nothing's wrong with PwC, but I know I'm not going to have any impact. Whether I'm there or not does not matter. There's 39,000 plus other people that can do this. And so I wanted to get out of there from day one. I started working at another smaller consultancy that was like 5 blocks from my apartment. That was great. And then I got laid off from that place because internet was downsizing. And what's really funny, my boss that laid me off, this was 20 years ago, is now some big investor. And now I'm meeting with her company this afternoon about what we're doing now. And so anyways, that was a lot more interesting because I'm able to, there's a company of like 8 or 9 people. I know I'm going to affect what's happening every day, good or bad.
Yeah.
And so that gives me some personal relevance, right? Just for me. And so when Kanye had moved to Newark and I linked up with him, I only met him once before in my life. And, but I got into music in the meantime. I'm doing my little DJing. And so he took me to Baseline with him the first day. It was a good time. And so I working with him a bit. Well, let's take a step back. When I got laid off, I thought, damn, I did what they said I should do. I did the corporate thing. I took very little risk, and I'm unemployed. I'm on unemployment. And so I might as well do my own thing if I'm going to end up here. I might as well bet on myself. And at least if I'm unemployed, it's on me.
Yeah.
But there's some upside to it potentially. So I never worked a job after that until a couple of years ago, which we can talk about. But in any case, so when I started working with Kanye, he was just, this is 2001, because he had done so much of the Blueprint that came out on September 11th, 2001. And so I thought I could add some business structure to what he was doing. And I know he was trying to put soul into his music, not trying, he was doing that. And I'm like, we can add like a consistent soul element, like piano, vocals, like vocal arrangement of other people. I can give you a plug and play. You'll be consistently soulful no matter what. And you have live instrumentation, like you'll be taken care of. And John was super talented, amazing singer, but not quite cool enough. Like, not like, he wasn't someone the ladies were all over, and he just wasn't like swagged out in any way. And so I'm like, we need to give John some of the sauce that Kanye has. Musically, appearance-wise, everything. Just need to get a little bit of that, and then it'll make this thing go a bit more. And so, I worked for Kanye. At some point, I started working for Kanye, making $200 a week. And so, me like hooking up John and Kanye, I know people say like, yeah, Devo introduced him. They're way more than that. Like I negotiated and signed John to the label Good Music that I worked for.
Yeah.
Before it was even called Good Music. But so that was very purposeful. And I probably wouldn't have gotten in music if it weren't for both of them. If it was just one of them, I wouldn't have dove into it. But I knew there was so much talent and that it could, together with me and with adding business structure to it, it would be a bigger thing, and it worked out.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely worked out. From a identity standpoint, in that time, oftentimes when you are the co-producer, producer working with an artist, especially when you're working that tight knit, you see yourself as this sort of, singular thing that you are helpful in sort of being the backbone of. Did you not have any sort of any doubts or hesitations in terms of bringing in somebody, a producer who at the time sort of had all of this, all of these accolades was coming off of the Blueprint? Or did you not even see yourself in the sort of the producer space in that sense? You kind of were still thinking of, like you said, the business mind behind these things, with production as sort of like this side piece or secondary.
I think I thought of myself, and still do, as a business person and as a conductor and like a product person. And so I didn't know what a product person was at that time, but I just know Kanye needed this. I know John needed this. I think they'll both complement each other. And moving forward, that's a lot of what I did in general, whether it's for a Britney Spears album or for a Bacardi new product release that they're doing. What do we need to make people get excited about this? Well, I think you add this element, we can do this. We go to all the DJs around here and we share this with them. We message it, it'll look like this. So production is just one element of that. With Kanye, I remember speaking to him once because I signed a deal to be a producer for Good Music. And I was like, would you sign this deal if you were me? Because I'm getting some heat myself and I don't need to be under somebody. And he's the only person that I would literally ask, like, if you're negotiating with someone, like, should I do this deal with you? And I'm like, would you do this deal? He was like, yes. Like, I have done this deal. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't done this deal. And he's like, in the music business, there's haves and have-nots. Either it's you getting it and all the opportunities are coming to you, or you're over here trying to get an opportunity. All the opportunities are coming to me. You need to be in the flow of these opportunities. Like, don't worry about if I get a little money from it or whatever. Literally, don't do that. You're playing yourself in that. So I was always lucky to work with Kanye and John and all these guys, super talented, from the Don C's and John Monopolies, and there's just too many, the Cootie and Chike, all these guys at that time, that I never looked at it like I'm not shining. I looked at it like we're the hottest. We're the hottest crew right now.
Yeah.
Let's run with that.
I got two places to go from there. The first is, I didn't think we'd talk about it, but let's talk about it. So since you wanted to bring up Kanye and contracts, obviously, currently he is sort of, this is just me from the outside, but I feel like he just had his first meeting with with an accountant or something, and was like, "Wait a minute, what is going on?" Because it started with this imaginary employee, and now has gone on to his sort of universal contract. Um, what are your thoughts coming from not coming from a place of when you think about yourself, the young version of yourself in that position, thinking about that sort of contract and what he's trying to do and what he's proposing now. um Oftentimes people say, you talk about the haves and the have nots, that you always have to, your first deal will always be a shitty deal because you don't have um anything other than the talent to provide. You don't have the marketing, you don't have the money, you don't have any of that. But having worked in other industries that deal with new ideas, new products, funding for those things, um, if you were to add an addendum to sort of what Kanye is working on, what do you think would make the industry sort of more fair or make sense to young Devo in the, contract is sitting in front of you with good music?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't like really dove into what he was proposing. I went through it, but I didn't really like super go into it. But the reality is that, you know, most of these artists, just like most startups, most companies fail. And so, unfortunately, it is a scenario where you are making a number of bets, and if something wins, it needs to win big for you as a label in order to make sense to invest in all these various things, most of which lose money. So if you have slim margins on the winners and losses on the losers, it's not really a viable industry.
Yeah.
So I respect that. And what I also feel is like, don't do these deals. Like, no one is making you do none of these deals. So literally, if something is uncomfortable or if ownership is key, don't do a deal and just grind it out. So for me, and I think, even with Kanye, my experience with him has always been like, the first contract is just a starting point. My understanding with all those contracts that he put out, he renegotiated a better deal after almost every album.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. And now he's a multi-billionaire. So
Yeah,
I don't know what the problem is.
The ownership is a tricky thing, right? Because you could own 100% of something that's worthless, right? And there is this trade-off in terms of percentages of ownership in order to get it to work. Would you? Because I always see John as in that era, as John may be the last superstar of the like the ending of the traditional sort of record business, like right at the edge in terms of R&B, right? Where before MySpace solidifies itself, before streaming becomes a thing, before sort of the internet, TikTok, all that stuff takes over, John is like the last person that's able to say, okay, here, Alicia Keys was a couple years before him, but being able to follow sort of that old school major label format to break an artist. So at that time, you're signing to good music. In this era, if you were 22-year-old Devo Springsteen, would you sign that contract? Or would you sort of look at the landscape and say, I can go and get popping on TikTok or whatever, YouTube, and not?
In terms of like having like a John sign,
John and yourself.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to take another sidebar real quickly because around this time, actually a little bit before this time, you guys and Kids in the Hall were doing your thing,
Oh,
and
we were
so
definitely a little after. We were at least we were trailing like by I would say about a year and some change because I remember one of the first, and I don't even know if it's official, but like I remember asking John for an acapella of "Used to Love You" so that I could do a remix for it to put knowledge on to try to also get popping. So
Mhm,
yeah, it
mhm.
was all sort of in the mix at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember when you guys were coming out, I was like, damn, man, what is Penn doing? Like, how does this turn into this music factory? Um,
We do have to
but
take a second to shout out
yeah,
Dana Ritchie at this time.
Dana Ritchie.
Because I feel like she was, at least for me, and I remember even hearing from I would hear, so I would go up to her. She was at Dana Ritchie's another Penn alum. She was at Bad Boy and then at J Records right when J Records was sort of conceived, when Jimmy Cozier and Alicia Keys are coming out. And I remember like I would go and meet up the office and we would play records for her, and she'd like, oh yeah, you should talk to John and Devo because they just connected with Kanye and they have some really cool stuff going on too. And she was always this very interesting conduit. And at least for me, um, I think sometimes you need the in order for the dream, like we talked about earlier, to be real and not seem like it's so far away. You need these a couple of these sort of ins that kind of keep you going, like being able to walk into a record label even though I was taking the train and the bus and doing all this stuff to get in there, to just play a record. As terrible, if I listen to any of those mixes or anything now, I'm always just like, man, I don't even know why you
Right.
let me continue going. But you almost need sort of those those little bit of, I'd say carrots, I guess, to just be like, oh yeah, maybe one day I can get in here, and maybe one day this remix that I did or something, it will happen. Um, how was she for you guys during that time? Was that just
Yeah,
somebody that you were always playing stuff for?
yeah, not a whole lot, but Dana's amazing, and I'll tell you two quick stories that there's and this is part of why people are like, yeah, college, I don't know about college. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about college either, personally. But if you make the if you choose the right place, it can change your life. Most of my friends are from Penn now.
Yeah.
But even when I started working with Kanye before any sort of record deal or anything, um, we're like, we need to do shows. We're putting out these albums. I'm going to the club. They're like, who is Kanye West? What is this? I'm like, man, he's the best. And but like, we gotta do shows too. But I've heard of Kara Lewis. I hear her in these songs. She's a good agent. She's at William Morris. My friend Amy from Penn, from Wharton, she works at William Morris in the mailroom. But maybe she works there. Maybe she can set up a meeting.
Yeah.
And so I contact Amy. And Amy, we're like 22. I'm like, Amy, my cousin, great rapper. He works with Jay-Z. It's amazing. Rockefeller Records, heard of it? Great. And so, can we get a meeting with Kara Lewis? And she's like, I have no clue. I'm literally in the basement of this building. I don't know who you're talking about. No one wants to meet with me, but let me see what I can do. She goes through some channels. Next thing you know, we have a meeting with Kara Lewis. And so we go meet with Kara, and it's me and a couple of Kanye's guys and Amy, who's just like literally never been out of the basement. And so we go meet with Kara, and it's literally her whole office from floor to ceiling is all covered with plaques. There's no wall space. It's literally all gold and platinum plaques. And so, and then Kanye, and I think it's a story people may have heard, Kanye just gets up uninvited. He just finds a CD player, like when they had CD players, and he puts in a CD, starts performing like the college dropout. I don't even know if he had a record deal at this time. And we left that meeting with Carrie Lewis as his agent. And that is from a relationship that I made in college. And so similarly with Dana, I went up to Bad Boy and met with her there. I'm like, so how do you make a record? How do you, if you make a record, how do you get someone to hear about it? How do you do that? And she's like, yeah, you do this, this, and this. And I remember Puffy was in there. He was in the office, just like talking to people. And I was like, fuck, that's Puff Daddy. I am in the same room with Puff Daddy. Fuck, I'm killing it. And so that was great. So I met with Dana, and I forget what year this was. She was at Bad Boy. I met with her again, maybe a year to a year and a half later. This time, I'm going in to meet with Ron Gilliard, the president of J Records, I believe, with Kanye about getting a deal for John. So I went from being like, how do you make a record, to meeting with the president of the company. And the first time I came, I was her guest, and I'm sitting there like, okay, yeah, I'll take a water, okay? And then I'll leave, get out of your way. And the second time, she's like, hi, guys, I'm gonna meet my boss. And I realized, I'm like, damn, man, I can do this. Anyone can do this. Like, how am I meeting with the president of this company? I don't know. I just found out what a record was last year. And so even now, in the work I do now, this is part of why I'm like, dude, anything can happen. Even if you don't know much, but you want to learn, you can do anything. And so Dana is amazing. And that's the one thing I put out to people about college is like, I don't remember much of the lessons I learned, but I have a network, including you. I wouldn't be here without college.
Yeah, I mean, just to even, both my managers went to Penn. Even work that I've gotten done, whether it be with Ted or I mean, the reason to even give you, I mean, I don't even know if you know, but like, quick backstory, when Kids in the Hall is solidifying, trying to figure out sort of what's going on, I remember John connecting me with Don C, because I was trying to book. I had moved to LA, and I was trying to figure out. Everybody's trying to figure out a way in, and I had booked. Tried to book Kanye for a BET Awards event or something like that, and this was maybe a month and a half after College Dropout came out, but it was right before the Usher tour was solidified. And so there was this window where I think I was going to be able to get him for like $5,000 or $6,000 to come and do a show, because I had already booked Just Blaze as the DJ, and it was like, oh yeah, we can put it together. It'll be this really cool, interesting thing. And yeah, in like that week and a half period, he all of a sudden was like, no, he is $50K now because he just did the deal for the Usher tour. But because I had already spoken to Don C at that time and had sent him some initial records, when 6 months later, when we did end up getting our meeting with John Monopoly, he was already this co-signer who had already listened to the group and had fucked with what Knowledge was doing. And it was a way, similar in the same way where like, not too much longer later, you now have somebody who's bringing you in that already has vetted you and knows who you are. And that accelerated the situation obviously extremely quickly. Also with John sort of Monopoly knowing the relationship that existed with, John Legend and things like that, when we were able to go sit down when Good Music was at the Sony offices, it was, it felt like it all sort of came full circle. I do not want to keep you here forever, so I do want to kind of move through a little bit. I would love to talk about, to me, the most ridiculous Grammy party that ever happened, when Kanye threw the Good Music Grammy party that you guys won. Did you win 3 Grammys that first time?
Yeah, I mean, I won for the Diamonds record, so I consider that my own.
Of
But
course.
the other ones, like best like R&B records and all that,
Yeah.
like I'm part of those victories too.
Yeah, yeah, and that was I think that was the first time that Farnsworth performed, and he was like dancing on a piano. And there was the Touch the Sky video premiere. It was probably, like I said, it was the most ridiculous party I think I've ever sort of been to. Since I don't know if anybody had put together something that crazy, and it again to be like, oh, you guys are there. We had just signed our deal with Hustle Period at the time, and then Raucous, and it was just like, oh, this thing actually can happen and is real. It's a very odd, when I think about it, I still think that there is some sort of um, delusion necessary, and you've talked about it a little bit over the last 10-15 minutes, like for that person, Amy, in the mailroom, to think that she could talk to one of the biggest agents at the time, to really have that audacity. I often tell people, like, that's what's necessary. You need to have that ability, like you said, to just believe, like, yeah, anything can happen, and the worst thing that anyone can say is no, but everything else is upside from from
Yeah.
there, and so you get uh you get the Grammy for Diamonds. You're a co-producer on that. You are a part of John Legend's first album. You have this essentially set. You're also on the Common album. You have this production path, career set in front of you. I mean, you are essentially working with some of the biggest artists at the time, the biggest producer, and would go on to be an even bigger sort of producer. And you said, I'm going to go to business school. What made you just fully just step away sort of from the record business at that point? Was it something that you just wanted to do always, or did you see something, a canary in the coal mine, that you felt like maybe I should shift?
It's a few things. Number one, I was seeing all these digital platforms pop up, and so yeah, it was getting easier to get free music. Um, Napster and LimeWire might be names people don't know hearing this,
Yeah.
And there's all these tools, Fruity Loops and things coming out to make making music easier. So just in my Wharton mind, I'm just realizing, so people are paying less and less for music, and it's getting easier and easier to make music. That is not generally a dynamic that you want to be in the midst of, where the supply is going up and demand is going down. Literally the worst possible place you could be. And for me, like being, I think 30 years old or something at that time, roughly, and I'm like, I can either choose to move into something else, or I'm going to be forced to move into something else. But I might be forced 5 or 10 years from now and not have as much choice. And the last thing was, I think it was Swagger Like Us came out, with Jay-Z and T.I. and Kanye and Lil Wayne. And I remember that song came out, it was just like overnight, like everywhere.
Yeah.
And the beat was so hard. And I was like, damn, man. I tried to remake the beat. And I talked to Kanye. I was like, you know what? I decided to go to business school. And I was like, I heard Swagger Like Us, the other day. I've been trying to like figure it out. I was like, I'll never make a beat like that. I'll never make a beat that good. And so I'm not going to keep doing this career. Like, I'm just not going to do that. And it's funny because he'd have a dentist office. He's like, that's crazy. When we are making these tracks and these songs, we are trying to get people to quit music. Right. I'm not trying to get my own team members to quit music, but we literally are trying to get people to be like, fuck, I'm just going to retire because I can't do this. And so I have options, and
Yeah.
we all have options, but sometimes we don't realize it. We don't think we do. I do have options, and I realize it. So going to school, going back to business school, I went to Columbia for my MBA, and it was really an opportunity for me to reset things, see what other careers are out there. How can I keep growing, like being this product person, but do it at a bigger scale and with more sort of strategies involved and less cult of personality, and less like we're going to rely on Kanye to just drive us home.
Yeah.
And so that was the reason. Like, I still feel like there's ways to express myself, to be relevant to the culture, but just to do it in some other space.
Yeah, I mean it's an I still think an insane again, having the gall and the audacity and the balls to make that decision, because at the time, theoretically, right, you could have just sort of become a part of the larger production team, and okay, you can't, okay, maybe your drums aren't as hard as the drums on Swagger Like Us, but you know, you're chopping samples or doing things or playing and doing things in a way that's still you simply just didn't see a path forward. Like you, like that point you were just like, oh, I guess it stops here for me. um
Yeah, and I worked with Jay-Z and Britney Spears, Aretha Franklin, John Legend, Deborah Cox, and Common. I know these guys from the Roots. These are my heroes. And then I find myself being, 30 years old and Grammy winning, whatever, Wharton degrees, and now I'm playing beats for a 19-year-old rapper, hoping he had a good day and he likes him.
mm,
Doesn't make sense to me.
yeah.
That's not where I want to be with my life. And I'm like, I just toured the world, and now I'm literally listening to this guy. He's smoking weed and telling me about these hoes. And I'm like, bro, like the internet's going on. It's like, I just got other stuff to do.
Yeah, no, that it makes sense, but it also is you know, it's great to know, like you said, everyone has options. I think that oftentimes uh most of the time that people don't have these options is because they're caught up in the identity of what they think they are and what they need to be, and that is the thing that is keeping them from sort of pivoting and making different decisions. And so you pivot and you go back to business school. Did you miss it at all? Like, seeing John on TV or Kanye sort of, evolving into even bigger. Were you sitting in in New York, just looking like, maybe I should,
Yeah,
jump out
I
there real
still
quick?
feel that way. I see this Wyoming ranch. I'm like, why did I go to business school? What was I thinking? Um, uh, but no, you're 100% right about the identity, and that being like what we really are holding on to a lot of times. But Devo Springsteen was a rap producer. As great as that was, I came to grips with like that's not my identity. It's a fake name.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, I don't consider myself a record producer. I consider myself as like a builder. So what else can I build?
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, plenty of times I've been like, yeah, this is not as sexy. Whatever I'm doing is just not as sexy. But I think there's a long-term payoff. And it wasn't sexy when I met Kanye in '95, and he was like getting, fake polo shirts from TJ Maxx, and then getting the real Izod shirt from Goodwill, and then his mom was taking the alligator off of the Goodwill shirt, pinging on the new TJ Maxx shirt to make it look like it's a fresh new polo. That wasn't sexy either.
Yeah.
But so just a point of where we're able to grow and expand. So now, so while I was in school, I was still doing music stuff, and I was still going to Hawaii to work with Kanye. And I had my own artist. My grades started suffering a lot, and I had to make a decision because my grades, I was doing terribly in school. My music sucks. It's not working for Kanye because I'm like all over the place, and everything was failing. So I had to just commit to what is the way forward.
Yeah.
And I said, let's try this business thing, and not even just that, but I made a music video for a band that was signed to me, like that you mentioned, that was interactive, and all these companies just started contacting me as a result of that, saying, "Hey, we want our stuff to be like that." And so, just looking at the big picture, I said, I think this thing with video could be exciting because I mentioned like part of why I left music. Part of why I got hired to work with Kanye is because I hooked him up with Kara Lewis. I got the first article ever written about Kanye West was by Dara Cook, who was my friend from Wharton. And I said, you should write an article in XXL about my cousin. And she did. That was his first press ever.
Yeah.
So that was going on. But the main thing, like people were asking Kanye for music at that time, and you had to deliver it via CDs. But this was back when you had to use a CD burner. So you had to press play and record, and then you had to wait for the whole track to go. Do you remember this? And like pause, finish. Yeah. So you had to record it in real time. This was in the 2000s. This was not 1980.
This was for the people that don't know. In order to get the best quality from your CD in the studio, because this was something that was specific to the studio. You were either using an ADAT or you were using a hard disk recorder, as they called it. So you had to play the song through all the way and then pause it and then add a marker, before you went to the next song. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there was not enough time in Kanye's day to do that. That's part of why I was hired, to burn CDs. And I don't think he realized that I was like from Wharton and all that. I was making $200 a week full time, and like being a CD burner, it's crazy. But my point is that I saw, like, I remember iTunes came out, and I'm like, Kanye, there's this new thing called iTunes on the Macintosh, where you just hit burn and just makes a CD. You don't even have to do no real time stuff, just makes it. And he's like, why you tell me that? Like, you could lose your job. Like, if I just use this iTunes, I'm like, my job is not burning CDs. My job is making you more productive. Yeah. So we should do that. But we got a million other things we got to do. And then came LimeWire and MP3s and streaming. So my point is, when all these companies came to me about this video stuff, and I said, I've been watching media the past 10 years get smaller and smaller and more digital. I wonder if this might be the next thing. Like, what's next? Maybe it's this in the video space. And so I said, let's commit to this. And I really changed the direction of my life to be more tech. And that's where we are now, is I'm pretty focused on this immersive, interactive, sort of connected media space.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that now, because we are in 2020, in the year of the COVID, and AI, AR, all these different things. I feel like we're at this point where sorry, it's like a weird dog in the background. I was making sure my dog was in here laying down. we're in I feel like the day before everything shut down, there was this, not a version, but there's always a, the bell curve in terms of in acceptance of something. I feel like AR at its most basic level, let's say, Snapchat filters, things like that, working in the digital space, and meetings, remote work, all this sort of stuff was not to the stuff of legend, but no one committed to it because it was, even though all of the technology was there, culturally, socially, we weren't there. Then immediately something like COVID happens, and now literally the next day, everyone's on Zoom. Everyone is sort of exploring, like, how are we going to now, double down, and how are we going to now really exist in this digital sort of space? So even for you, because it looks like, I mean, I'm assuming your new endeavor was started last year, correct?
Yeah.
How has it changed for you dealing in the AI space, since the year of the COVID began in March?
Yeah, I think that for us, how we look at what we're doing with video is squarely in line with where media is going on the internet. I think that it is a matter of when, not if, what we're doing is a standard piece of internet experience. And just to be clear, for anyone listening, seeing this, what we do is we have a platform, cloud-based platform, anyone can use to create interactive, what we call smart videos. So number one, they're able to, you can interact with it in real time. It's like if you see the Netflix Bandersnatch movie, you can
Which
play
I
around.
I thought about you as soon as that thing came out. I was like, this is
I
Devo's thing.
we were doing that ages ago.
Yeah.
But so and that's fine. That's not the core of what the business is. What the business is really about, and what the product is about, is adding a layer of intelligence to video, which the vast majority of the internet swimming around us now is video.
Yeah.
But there's no connectivity, there's no intelligence. So what we're doing is making video that we all love to watch every day be more intelligent and responsive. Meaning, you can watch a video and speak to it, and it can hear you and change in response to you. You can contact someone, like instead of a video saying, "Hey, you like our private school? Here's our phone number. Call us." No, tap it and it calls them, right? Or open a bank account in the video. Making video be more connected to other applications and systems and interactive, right? And so I can literally sit here and be like, "Oh, that's a dope sweater. Do you have that in my size? Yeah, order it for me." Cool, done. That's what we're enabling in social media, ad networks, etc., in anywhere. So that's where we're going, regardless. I think that we're in an advantageous position to do that. Things like COVID only accelerate where we're already going.
Exactly.
So even right now, we're dealing with a major department store that's like, we don't, number one, part of our facilities can't be open, and those that are open have a limited capacity. So how are we going to sell? Well, they don't have to be coming to your store or even your website to sell. Let's go on Instagram. Let's give them the exact same content, make it more cool, more fun, more personalized. Let them buy it right there. So for me, it's only accelerating the path forward that we see. And so I'm just trying to keep up.
Yeah,
right
I mean,
now.
I think that you are. It's amazing to hear. Something that I have been thinking a lot personally is, how long ago January was as even idea in terms of goal setting. And what I've been trying to tell people is, this is the Kazaa, Napster, streaming. This is that era all over again, but even faster. Those sorts of cultural changes took some years to really shift. And if you were um, if you were in the music industry when I was, let's say 2006 to 20. Well, I guess I'm still putting records out, so whatever. But 2006, 2005, and you weren't thinking about the internet, then you were playing a game that was dead on arrival to a certain extent. And I feel like that now, where we're in this space where if you're still trying to do things like January of 2020, it doesn't exist anymore. Like there is no going back to whatever that sort of reality was. And that we are definitely in a time now where, interactivity, I have no clue what's on the other end, but I do know that the world is going to be so vastly different that you should be being as forward thinking as possible and as flexible as possible. Because however it's going to land, it's not going to be the same way it was, a year ago.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you guys are very far ahead in that space.
Yeah, I think we're ahead, and I know we're ahead, and I think later this year when we put out the new technology where you can speak to videos, I think that's when people will be like, oh shit, we're still using YouTube. Oh, and so a couple of things. Number one, I think about like that movie. What's the movie with Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, where Bruce Willis is a superhero, but he doesn't realize it? And it's that Penn.
Oh yeah. Why can't I remember? It's M. Night Shyamalan. I mean, why can't I remember? Unbreakable.
Unbreakable. Yes.
Yeah.
So Mr. Glass.
Yeah.
And that he is trying to find a superhero, and so he's just trying to like help the world by identifying the superhero. And so the only way he knows to identify him is to make a little thing happen, and he can think that the superhero will show up. And so he just keeps doing this and investing his life into it until he realizes, I am the villain that is going to make the superhero show up and come to me. And I'm realizing the thing that I'm searching for. And that's what I've been realizing lately. I'm like, I spent the past 10 years investigating, like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? What is someone going to do? How would you do this? Let's figure out what they're going to do. And so now I realize, I'm like, we're the ones doing it.
Yeah.
Right. So I go to Netflix. I'm like, yeah, you can click around a video. That's cool. Now, imagine if people could talk to Orange is the New Black like this. What do you think happened to your market share then? And so I love it. Every day I'm glad that I'm able to do this stuff. I can't believe I have an opportunity to help what I think build the future. But I love this podcast, and I've seen it before, because I try to bring the mindset from us starting a Good Music and a John Legend and these different marketing projects to this company. How we price it, giving people stuff for free, like we're gonna give you this mixtape, you're gonna love this artist, and then we're gonna hit you over the head.
Yeah.
We're gonna do exclusive. This music will only be available for an exclusive period of time. Maybe this functionality will only be available for 2 months. You better use it now. Like, cool stuff that comes from our culture. And so if American culture drives global culture and Black hip hop culture drives American culture, I think we're in a pretty good scenario. That culture is underrepresented in the technology communication landscape. So that's part of what we're doing, is besides having awesome technology, and that's cool, you can speak to stuff or whatever it is embedding our communication, our design, me, like all of our presentation is embedded with culture. So if you go to our website, actually, we just put up today,
Okay.
adventure, ADVENTR .io. You can get a taste of what I'm talking about. But besides the fact that I think we can make a lot of money and all that, I think if we can get more young kids of color to see that you can be in this tech space and you can represent your culture still, and it can be cool and it can be Black. I think that would be a major win. Forget whatever money. There's way easier ways to make money than what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But that's a big part of why we're doing this. And I think that because I'm Black, or you're Black, or whoever, or brown, that should not be a hindrance in terms of hiring me at Google or investing in me or whatever it may be. It should be a plus.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get your products adopted, you should hire me first. Hire you first.
There is a I've had my own sort of weird experiences in that sort of space, trying to explain and translate, which often doesn't happen on the front end. I feel like it's understood on the back end. They're like, oh yeah, but to try to sell them on things sometimes in the front end or on yourself, I feel like is I don't know, still at least for me an uphill battle. But I have one last question, but I think you actually covered a good amount of it. But to keep it concise, what is the thing that you learned from hip hop that you sort of use in your everyday life? I mean, you definitely just touched on things, but if you had something else to add.
Man, every day I think about hip hop in regards to this business. And this business, besides my daughter, this business is like my life. And I think, I'm right now going through this whole thing with our team about how this is about experiences. We're an experience company. How we deal with people, like me dealing with you, like it's really about experiences. And so what that means is we have lots of cool functionality in our player, in our website, but who cares? Like, it's about how people feel when they touch it. Does it sparkle? Right? Everyone has video players. You can touch it and something else, it loads up, something else plays. No, we're not doing that. Does it connect? Like, this is what I learned a lot from Kanye. We all have the same machines. We have the same keyboards, same MPCs. Why does some people's stuff feel so much more urgent or more vibrant? We have the exact same stuff, but there's usually some sort of emotional connection. There's something that's embedded in the music. It helps when you have live musicians or you're sampling stuff. But it's about that experience. So if I'm dealing with engineers or something, I'm like, that functionality is great, but it doesn't feel awesome. And that's what people want, is to feel good. And so you could get 20 Google engineers in a room, they're not going to be able to deliver what I can or what we can if we focus on the feeling. And so, or the experience. And so, and it's the same thing when dealing with people, how you make people feel when they deal with you. It's not just, I'm going to see you tomorrow, or sure, we're going to do this transaction. It's how that experience is dealing with you. And working with Kanye and all these guys is like, when they come into this show, this is going to be the best show of their lives. We're going to have them feeling inspired. We talk about feelings, not technical.
Yeah.
And so when they hear this song, like, they're going to feel motivated. Or we talk a lot about that. Young Jeezy, Motivation King. Kanye, inspiration king, like feeling, right? So I think about that a lot. I think we should all think about that a lot more than we do. How we make people feel on a personal basis, on a work basis, on a product basis. And I think you'd be surprised how far you can get if you pay attention to that detail. And I think that's what a Don C has nailed. I think that's what a Virgil has nailed. Anyone can make a sneaker and put a stamp on the side with the address of the shoe company, but it's not going to feel the same.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
stuff like that.
No, it's an amazing place to end it. Thank you so much for your time. You're so far in the future. I'm glad I got a little bit of it to be able to to talk to you, catch up.
No, man, thank you, and thank you for this even messaging around this podcast. Like, think like a rapper. Like, I don't know. I feel like it might sound like funny, but I'm like, no, you should think like a rapper.
Yeah,
might help you.
Yeah, I mean, I there's one thing that I've realized from the podcast is even when I ask that question, every single person, regardless of how they've been influenced in the culture, outside of the culture, whatever, everyone's got something different. And I think, and that was what was the impetus for even starting it, because it was like, oh, like you said, it is the seeds of it spread everywhere, and especially over the last 40 years. And because of that, you never know how it touches and shapes people's lives and gets them to, Thug Motivation 101, gets them to get out and get something and figure it out. So that's why we're here. But man, thank you.
Thank you.